Firstly, there is a conflict between the West and Russia, which has turned out to be a major war. Conflict is not due to some breakaway region fighting with another group or an internal civil war. It's a contest between the West and Russia. But in this instance, Russians were insisting that NATO should not come in. Ukraine should not be a member of NATO, and the missiles should not be there next to their boundary. President Biden decided that he'll take on Russia and China both. It's an invasion. That US went into Iraq without the UN sanction because they thought Iraq was a threat to them. But Ukraine and Taiwan can't be compared. I don't know from where the Ukraine president got this idea. West has backed him with words that America can't impose sanctions on Iran for trading with Russia. They can't surround Kyiv, that's the big setback for them. And being an actor, he enjoys acting to the world. Shows that the West is now restricted. They haven't got the power they have earlier. They are looking after the Ukrainians and the Russians, and some of them are not even charging them for the meals. It is not Asia's problem. If you want anything, you must consult Asia. They didn't ask.
Biggest crisis that engulfed the entire world soon after COVID-19 struck. You would agree with me if I tell you that it is the war between Ukraine and Russia. Although it seems like it's a dispute between just two single countries, we all know that the impact it has on the other countries as well. To get an in-depth idea about what this crisis is and how it began and how it will have impact on the other parts of the world, we have with us a prominent political leader in Sri Lanka who's well known to be thorough with international affairs as well. That is the leader of the United National Party, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe. Thank you for agreeing to speak to News First about the crisis between Ukraine and Russia. Like I mentioned before, Mr. Wickremesinghe, although it seems like just two countries fighting, we all see everybody else wanted to have a certain part of the whole crisis. Where did this all begin?
Well, firstly, there is a conflict between the West and Russia, which has turned out to be a major war in Europe. That is, Europe has not been able to uphold the order which they themselves crafted after 1989. It was a Western-centric political and economic system. So, in a Western-centric economic or a political system, you should be able to maintain peace in Europe. But they couldn't, and the conflict is not due to some breakaway region fighting with another group or internal civil war. It's a contest between the West and Russia. So, this first brings into question the ability of the West now to keep ensure peace and security in its own backyard. Forget about the rest of the world. Ukraine itself was a part of Russia and the Soviet Union, which broke away, and there are still unresolved disputes, unlike in case of Belarus. So, Crimea was the one area which was really Russian speaking, and Russians have gone and occupied Crimea. Some countries have accepted it, others are objecting it. They have also gone into some parts of Donbass. The previous presidents sort of did a balancing act between the West and Russia. But in this instance, Russians were insisting that NATO should not come in. Ukraine should not be a member of NATO, and the missiles should not be there next to their boundary, because they say it's aimed at Russia, which is correct, not anyone else. Mr. President Trump sort of made his peace and ensured there was no issues. President Obama had shifted his emphasis to Pacific, but President Biden decided that he will take on Russia and China both. So, he's been pressing them on Ukraine and on Taiwan, hoping they can break them.
But would this be different if Warsaw was in place?
What?
Warsaw, the military alliance that Russian countries.
But that went off when the Soviet Union fell. No, it's a question of the policy. I think President Biden and especially Boris Johnson of putting pressure both on Russia and on China, so that they can break and the Western primacy will be maintained. And to that extent, while they said they won't take Ukraine into the NATO, somehow they did not allow the Ukraine president to go and deal with President Putin. Nor did the man think that he should go there if he didn't, getting NATO support. So therefore, what happened was that President Putin decided he can't wait any longer. He can't have missiles coming in. So he went and invaded Ukraine. It's an invasion and nothing else. I am not an admirer of President Putin either. But he went in for the self-protection of Russia on this issue. This is why most of the world is silent. It is not a simple invasion. If that is a simple invasion, no, we can cut Russia off from everything. So now what's happened is the world, while West has rallied behind the Ukraine president and others, Asia and Africa are silent. And it shows that we do matter. Yeah, because without it can't swing one way or the other. And our silence may work to the advantage of Russia in the long term.
So can someone justify the acts of the Russian president? Because his explanation is that this is not something that I just did abruptly. I've been telling them for the longest time not to join hands with the West. So can someone justify what he is doing?
I think that his concern is genuine. Whether he should have invaded is another question. I think he should have still tried his level best to put more pressure. But of course there are 2 points that he says, as you said, I've been telling them and there has been no response. Other one, he justifies it on the basis that US went into Iraq without the UN sanction because they thought Iraq was a threat to them. So he's going on that principle. There are very little the US can do on that. The other is the new agreement, the joint statement between Russia and China, between the two presidents, which was issued during the Beijing Olympics, the 4th of February statement. It sort of upgraded the friendship treaty between them. It became a what they call friendship without limits and without conditions.
Unconditional.
Yes, yeah. And both have committed to support each other in looking after their co-interests. So Ukraine is one, Taiwan is another. So that I would say is the background.
So China has openly pledged allegiance to Russia.
Well, they have said there should not be aggression, but they say it's due to the NATO.
So they are asking everyone to remain calm except for Taiwan, because there were talks about China wanting to
Actually, I think what's happened is that the policy of pressurizing Russia on Ukraine and China on Taiwan has completely broken off. But Ukraine and Taiwan can't be compared. Ukraine is an independent country recognized by Russia. Taiwan is a part of China, and that's what all of us recognize. And the KMT in Taiwan, one of the major, the Kuomintang, one of the two main parties, it's only the Taiwan Progressive Democrats who treat it as a separate country altogether. So this is the issue. But one of the reasons is that China has a lot of firepower on the Taiwan Straits. It's not possible for the US to come in. So US has been trying to balance out in other areas with the Quad. But I think this was a mistake to have encouraged Ukraine to resist.
Now that you mentioned Quad, Mr. Wickramasinghe, when the previous Quad meeting was held in Australia, US State Secretary Anthony Blinken was very adamant that Russia will be invading Ukraine. Although the Russian president kept on denying it, it's almost as if they knew this was going to happen. So do you think that they deliberately pushed Russia to enter into...
No, Russia was carrying out plans. And I think Russia may have leaked out some of them also. Right. But though they were talking, they were not expecting it. They had only thought of putting sanctions on Russia, and that's not working now. Russia is going ahead. The sanctions hasn't made a difference. Russia can hold out for about 2-3 months. They have always been saying this, but then they should at that stage told Ukraine, look, we can't protect you. Go there, because it didn't matter to them where the missiles are. They need not have gone to Ukraine.
Instead, they gave hope, and the Ukrainian
president...
Well,
there seems to be, I don't know from where the Ukraine president got this idea. Now all of a sudden he wants planes and he wants sanctions, he wants a no-fly zone. I don't know what happened in the discussions between the West and this.
But it seems like he is not getting anything out of the agreement he had with the West, because he kept on saying that the West is backing him and that
Yes,
sanctions were imposed, but then sanctions aren't enough now. Now he is
West has backed him with words and also with missiles, Stinger missiles and javelins to take on aircrafts and tanks. It has had some success, but you know, when a big army keeps moving forward, that alone won't be enough. It's they're fighting in small squads. So that may be all right at the moment, but I don't think it can hold if there's a offensive. It didn't hold down in the southern Ukraine, where they've taken over the whole coast and the industrial area.
Now, Russia is saying that the sanctions imposed on them don't really matter, but in reality, the economy is on the verge of collapsing.
I won't say it's the verge of collapsing. It hurts, it does matter, but it won't collapse, because they plan to go on for a month or two, and they'll have China supporting them. Then Iran is also a place from which they get goods. And if you look at the nuclear agreement with Iran, the Russians have been trading with Iran. So they insisted that if the joint nuclear cooperation agreement is to go through, that America can't impose sanctions on Iran for trading with Russia. I think now the Americans have agreed to that.
So,
because they want this, they want the joint nuclear agreement, and Russia at that time put its foot down. So anyway, there have been enough openings. Once is so, India will trade, most of Asia will trade.
so
I know it will be difficult for them, but they've gone through the 89 collapse and 98. I don't think this will be as bad as that. Though some of the Western countries have pulled out, there's always others to fill it up. No? The Western motor car companies went out. It's a good market for the Chinese, and the Indians and the Malaysians. Like that, there are many gaps that can be filled. Even these department stores that have moved out, okay, others can go in.
So at one point, the idea was that Russian president was alone, while everyone else was with the Ukrainian president. But now the tables have turned.
No, actually the West is there, not the rest. Others were nowhere. As far as he is concerned, he is happy with that, as long as everyone is silent and doesn't condemn him. In the West, a very strong line is being taken by President Biden and Prime Minister Johnson. But you can see the French are not so hard, and even Germans are cooling down.
But Germany increased its defense budget.
That had nothing else to. Germany has run down its armed forces. I would say that some of our infantry units are better armed than the Germans, and certainly our commandos and the special task force and is certainly above what the Germans can offer in that field. That Indian army is much better equipped than the German army, or for that matter the Pakistan army. They have not been spending, they are using the money for welfare. So when this happened, there have been a lot of disagreement between the two. Germany put it up for 2%. Now Americans can't blame the Germans, and Americans will have to stay in Germany. In the meantime, with this they have to develop their armed forces. But because they put 2%, they won't spend 2% now. But they have to. Their tanks are outdated. There are many units haven't even got the full armaments that they should have. Any French, British, anyone is much better armed than them.
So for how long do you think that the Russian president can drag this on for?
He can hold it out for 2 months, 3 months.
2 months? That's a long time.
I don't know how long it will take, but it can't be over in a week. If you look at it, US took 1 month to take over Baghdad when they invaded Iraq. The British also required about 5 weeks to take over Falkland, go to Stanley. Indians took Dhaka over within 2 weeks, but that is because for 5 months before that, the Bangladeshi Liberation Forces had been fighting the Pakistan armed forces. They had cleared a lot of it, and then the Indians could go through it.
So what does it mean that Russia is taking a considerable long time to?
It's not. It's only 1 week in my this thing. I listened to a lot of the analysis by, I've been listening to some by the Indians and people like the French. They also it's going to take longer time. They may be trying to reduce the civilian casualties. If they can't surround Kyiv, that's the big setback for them. But still they'll be sitting tight in half of Ukraine.
Do you think they're making progress now, Russia?
I think they are making progress.
But they
As
still.
that the cries of help become more urgent, it means Russians are, because if they are doing as well as they claim that they have killed 10,000 Russians, brought down about 25 planes and all, they are no need to ask for anything. No?
But Ukrainian president was quite confident.
He is not. I think they are gradually getting pushed out. They can't.
So was this
Russian army, as I said earlier, the one that tore off the Hitler's army, Hitler's defeat was due to Russians. Their general, their leadership is also good. I mean, World War II, some of the best generals, Zhukov and others, came from Russia. And no one to really match him in the whole war.
Do you think that the Ukrainian president underestimated Russia?
Not
Or
only-
his way of responding was
No, I think he just made a mess of it. What is the president's first duty? To safeguard his country or the territory that is left to him. He sort of thought he can face all this, and being an actor, he enjoys acting to the world. But the problem is, the day this is over, his countrymen is going to question him and ask, what have you done?
How will the United Nations Human Rights Council will have an impact on?
They can't have impact on war. No?
But there are resolutions being passed, agendas being moved.
No, they want to take it. No, UN General Assembly passed a resolution, but it's non-binding. And a lot of people who have been silent supported it because they are also hedging it. Others like Sri Lanka abstained. Security Council, they couldn't get the measure through.
Because Russia had the veto power.
Yeah, and also either the 3 Asian countries didn't vote. Human Rights Council is not there. It has to ensure when countries are, it's not for a war situation. I would disagree there that you can't do for a war situation.
How will the rest of the world have an impact on this, Mr. Vikram Singh?
No, the rest of the world being silent shows that the West is now restricted. They haven't got the power they have earlier. That's why I say world peace no longer can be done by the West. Asia has to get together. But we have a responsibility to maintain world peace. This is the order, the Western order has not been able to maintain Western peace. They've got into a conflict. You just can see, you look at the statements that some of them are making, like President Biden, others. Mr. Blinken has said, we are with Ukraine now, we are with them short term, medium term, long term. So that virtually puts you in there. No? So if they can't do it, it is like a policeman becoming a party to the dispute, then someone else has to step in. So Asia now has to show that they have the capacity. I think it's up for China and India first to show this, and others also. But we've shown that we have to be reckoned with. You can't do it. We may not have aircraft carriers or missiles, but when it comes to this, we have to be reckoned, and that's the message I think unintentionally Asia has sent out to the world.
So are we doing enough?
Yeah, we are doing enough. The moment you have nothing to do except to keep our mouth shut.
That's the best we can.
That's the best.
What's the best case scenario? Where do you think this will?
If they can come to some agreement and take off quickly, then the world economy can pick up. And Russians withdraw. Okay, let's say NATO won't come in. NATO missiles won't be there. Russia moves out. Everyone guarantees Ukraine independence. Leaving aside Crimea, I think Russia must then talk with Ukraine and sort out the areas in the Donbass that has been taken over and restore that part of the Black Sea coastline which they have now taken from Ukraine.
But it is highly unlikely that Russian president will resort to something like that even after.
He will do it on his conditions, which is he will want to see the present president and that whole group out of power.
That would be one of the conditions.
Yes, unsaid, but that will be a condition. What he calls denazification of Ukraine. That is, those who were there wanted to go to war with him. So that depends. If you didn't go to war, you could have kept everyone there. You went to war and you have lost Ukraine.
What should have the Ukrainian president done instead?
He should have told the NATO, you are not protecting me, I'm going to take an agreement with Russia. This has been a Russian concern for a long time. It's not only matter relating to President Putin alone. You know, Ukraine has sentimental value to Russians, so he can hold the people for some time. He must be doing his own propaganda because they have stopped any other news agency from coming in, except the Chinese. So they are doing the propaganda there.
China has made a clear stance. It's unlike
Chinese
the other
news is giving a lot of the Russian news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they have openly pledged allegiance to Russia.
Not pledge allegiance. I think the bigger partner is China. Under this no limit friendship, they are helping each other. But he tells China, no, if this fails, that means Taiwanese will also lose hope. And what does China achieve? Without fighting a war there, by funding the Russians, they have achieved their ends also. Chinese are clever.
What about our country, Mr. Vikram Singh? How will we be affected?
No, this is a short-term issue. We've had earlier the price of fuel going up. We've had these shortages, but we had dollars. Now we haven't got dollars, we haven't got rupees. So we must tackle a basic issue. From time to time there can be world issues. Okay, that's a different matter. For instance, a very hot summer can put up petrol prices, or a very cold winter, because ACs have to be used. A cold winter especially, we send prices up. Those are things we have to deal with. If this is over within 3 months, I think it will come back to normal. Our real problem is when the petrol prices were down last year, we didn't pass the benefit to the consumer. So he's losing out at both ends, but that's due to government action. In Europe, they got the benefit of lower prices, so they can afford to take on the higher prices.
Now an oil barrel is 130 US dollars.
Yeah, 130.
But Russia and Ukraine are very important to us in terms of exports for Ceylon tea and the imports of wheat.
Yes, so wheat prices will go up. You can't send tea now to either of the countries. Russia would have taken except for the sanctions on Russia. And well, we gave too much emphasis for Ukraine tourists. We shouldn't have. If we waited a bit more, we should have got the Western European tourists who would have paid 100 plus. We got these guys at 70. But I must say one thing, I have been to some other places, small guest houses, all hotels, restaurants. They are looking after the Ukrainians and the Russians, and some of them are not even charging them for the meals. That's one thing good about Sri Lankan people in the tourist trade. They said we look after them till they can go back.
But the cost is high now in maintaining them.
Well, they said this, it's a question of food, they have no problem, and it's rooms, well, they say, long as the rooms are not wanted, they'll find some way. But I think that's the part of Sri Lankan hospitality, and it's good. In the long term, we must then try to get high-paying Russian tourists in. High-paying Ukrainian tourists will be difficult to get for some time, or low-paying because the damage done. But it's a good thing that we should advertise there.
Are you satisfied with the way that we maintain our foreign policy in terms of this whole conflict?
Now, as far as this conflict is concerned, we have not opened our mouth. The best is not to open our mouth.
What will happen if you do? We'll say
no, why do you want to take sides? Because no one in Asia is taking sides, no? India, Bangladesh, the whole South Asia has taken one line. We there.
So how do we tactfully play this game for our benefit?
So we are like Indians and Pakistanis and Bangladeshis keeping our mouths shut.
But Pakistan was recently...
They went there, but otherwise Mr. Modi, Prime Minister Modi also spoke to Prime Minister Putin and all. Just nothing, you haven't got to do anything. This is not our problem, you sort it out. And this is not Asia's problem. If you want anything, you must consult Asia. They didn't ask us. They didn't ask the Asian countries what to do. We are no longer going to toe that line. It's a world peace. We should have been asked, and we were not asked.
But we approached Russia for a currency swap to purchase oil.
Yes, that's before the war.
So it won't have an impact on the relationship we have with them, or the situation there?
No, if you buy in rubles, you may be able to do it, but at the moment we shouldn't do it till these sanction issues are over. So you can use the rubles and buy oil if they are willing.
What is the ideal way to tackle this issue, Mr. Vikram Singh?
Which one? Sri Lanka issue, Ukraine issue, Russia issue.
Sri Lanka in tackling all these issues.
Sri
especially
Lanka
with
has
the
to
challenges
look
we
at
have.
its economic problems and sort it out. There are no other way. There are no other way in it.
A solution to the economic problem will solve all the problems we have.
No. First, before anything, you must have electricity, you must have fuel, you must have food, you must have jobs. You must have for that you must have dollars and rupees. Stable rupee and dollars.
Speaking of the economy, how will floating the rupee help solve the issue?
You will have to float the rupee, but you have to do it in the correct way, and that alone is not enough. There has to be a lot of other measures to also support it. By itself, no.
Just this morning, Financial Times had reported that the current Ukrainian crisis will have an impact on Sri Lanka, especially in terms of tea exports and the recovering tourism sector.
Tea exports, I said yes, in the short term. Medium term, no. We are expecting that it's not a big this thing. That's not excuse of what is happening here. Tourism sector, but then we are getting low paying tourists. And how many were coming? It will help us now to focus on high paying tourists in Europe.
That will.
Yeah, these people are forced to take Ukrainian tourists, no? $70, $60.
Thank you.